Hello everyone, my name is Stanley St. Rose, and today we're going to be talking about One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, written by Kesey. Now, before I go into summary analysis of this work, please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and or comment so that the channel can continue to grow. Now, in this work by Kesey, we meet a woman by the name of Nurse Ratchet. Nurse Ratchet is a very powerful individual. She doesn't play around. She runs this mental institution with an iron fist, and she's very precise, very accurate. She just doesn't play around. The men and it's all men, it's only men in this mental institution, and some of them have checked themselves in. And some of them have been placed there by the government. The ones who check themselves in, they could check themselves out. They're there because they recognized that they needed some help. And they're there for help, but they don't really receive help because they're just taken control of by Nurse Ratchet, the big nurse. And pretty much... later, this character by the name of Mcmurphy is going to come in. He's going to pretty much say that these men need to grow a pair. So Nurse Ratchet, she's an interesting character. She's very brutal. She has this group of orderlies that literally follow her like she's a dictator. Her orderlies are rough, they're brutal, they're nasty, they're not nice, they're not kind, they're not gentle when dealing with the patients. Very malicious, and Nurse Ratchet, she likes them because they take orders well. Ratchet, she pretty much, she decides everything for these men. When they watch TV, when they do chores, when they sleep, she keeps them in line by always threatening electroshock therapy when they get out of line or get too bold. She keeps them medicated, and it doesn't seem like this is really a mental institution trying to help out people deal with their mental problems. It's more for just women to just hold power over these men. And also, at the time this novel was being written, in terms of the medical field, in terms of psychology, the world was way behind. So a lot of the practices like lobotomies that are, that were used then are not used now. Hopefully no doctors performing a lobotomy today. And another thing I'd like to add here is that our narrator, Chief Brogdon, he is pretending to be deaf and dumb. He has his own mental problems, so you have to be cautious while reading this novel because Chief Brogdon, all of these characters have some type of mental problem. Even Nurse Ratchet, the book is not focused on Nurse Ratchet's mental health, but the way that this woman treats these human beings and the way that she has to show complete dominance over them, maybe she doesn't have a mental problem, but she definitely has a problem. So that's something that should be questioned and maybe argued. So you have to be cautious while you're reading this. Our narrator, again, is Chief Brogdon, and Brogdon... Nurse Ratchet doesn't really go after him too much because she thinks that she's deaf and dumb. And that says a lot about the staff and the institution, because how can someone live in an institution for several years and pretend to be deaf and dumb and nobody discovers it? That raises a lot of flags for me. So the novel goes on, and all of these men, they're underneath Ratchet's thumb, except for Brogdon, of course, because his his laying under the weather or not getting detected by the radars of this institution has worked for him, and it's not the best life, but for some reason he's this massive chief Indian. I mean, he's Chief Brogdon, and he's in this institution, and nobody's really discovering his big secret. So the institution is running smoothly. Ratchet is happy. The orderlies are happy. They're being brutal. They're hurting people. They're doing whatever they want, and everything is so far so good. I mean, the patients, the patients who check themselves in, the ones who are vegetables. I mean, life is not wonderful for them, but they're just existing under Ratchet's thumb. Everything is being run like a machine because the big nurse, Ratchet, is all about running her institution like a machine. At certain points, it even seems like she has complete power over everything. Even the doctor that oversees everything, she holds power over him before Randall Mcmurphy gets there. When Randall Mcmurphy appears on the scene, it's a whole different ball game. And Randall Mcmurphy, I mean, he was sent to prison. I mean, he didn't want to do heavy labor. He committed statutory rape, and he has a rap sheet of a whole bunch of other things. And he gets out of heavy labor in prison, and he pretty much lies his way into this mental institution, and he's pretty much going underneath, pretty much under Ratchet's supervision, and the staff there has to determine if he actually has a mental problem. And when he shows up, Mcmurphy is like, I'm gonna do whatever I want because this is not so tough. And the war begins. The war between Ratchet and Mcmurphy begins, and it's pretty much like they're in a boxing ring going back and forth. And right away, Mcmurphy's like, man, why are the men need to grow a pair. They have no power. They have no identity. I need to change all of this. And Mcmurphy goes about changing all of this, and he becomes a leader for the men. I mean, you can go as far as he becomes like a Jesus Christ to the men, and I'll explain what I mean by that a little bit later. But let's go first. Let's talk about this war between Mcmurphy and Ratchet. They pretty much go to war. They go to war over the television. Mcmurphy wanted to watch the World Series, and Ratchet did not want the World Series to be played on TV for the men. Mcmurphy gets the schedule changed, and the men, there's protests. Mcmurphy, he pretty much pushes the men to protest, to go over, to undermine Ratchet, to tell the men to grow a pair, to stand up for themselves, and they all literally stand up to Ratchet and start fighting back. These men who were, getting pills, getting electroshock therapy, staying in line, now they're just running around, defying the power of the big nurse, and Ratchet is not happy. Now, Ratchet, within this work, she's all about staying calm and keeping cool and keeping everything under control. But Mcmurphy definitely gets underneath her skin because he's just a different animal. He's a different animal. He wins the battle of the TV. He wins the battle. I'm just paraphrasing here. They don't say like battle of the TV or whatever, but within the book, there's these conflicts, right? The TV conflict, the fishing trip conflict. Like literally, Mcmurphy gets permission to him and and all of his disciples and all of these mental patients. They go on a fishing trip. And the men fish. The men feel independent, and if they feel like they grew a pair. And Mcmurphy keeps defying Ratchet, Chief Brogdon starts to believe in Mcmurphy. All the other men, they believe in Mcmurphy. There is a section within the novel where Mcmurphy realizes if he doesn't behave, he'll probably never, be free, because it's the staff have to decide his mental state and where it's at. And when he realized this, he tried to behave, and then the men were like, "What's going on? You're our leader. Why are you backing up?" The thing is, like, Mcmurphy, again, he was not sent there through his like, he didn't check himself in. He was sent there to be evaluated. He was sent there because he wanted to escape prison and get a little bit easier life. So when he realized that his life wasn't in his hands, he tried to behave, but then he stopped trying to behave because he realized that he was this Christ-like figure to these men and that he was their leader. And he goes back into his role, and he just keeps on causing havoc. So Ratchet, the battle continues on. Now, one note about Ratchet is that, again, she tries to keep her cool, she tries to keep her calm. In the novel, Ratchet is described, the way that she's described is that she has huge breasts, and Mcmurphy, like, even though that she tries to hide this from the men, whatever she tries to hide her chest from, or whatever shirt or whatever she wears to hide her body, the men still see them. So there are some weird or uncomfortable scenes of the men talking about her breasts, and there's even the scene where Mcmurphy literally goes berserk on Ratchet and rips her dress open and her breasts come out. So it gets very just over the top, and I mean, I guess it's what you would expect from a mental institution, and a nurse who's the big nurse, which when you think about it, if you think about the big nurse and you think about 1984 and Big Brother, Ratchet was like the big brother of this institution. Mcmurphy comes in and ruins this, and there's several different types of battles of anger, of physical abilities, of the place of women and the place of men, and how Mcmurphy's trying to tell the men grow a pair, and how Nurse Ratchet's literally trying to chop off balls. And the battle rages on, and pretty much ultimately what happens is Mcmurphy literally throws a massive party. He gets a prostitute to come into the institution and have sex with this character by the name of Billy, because Billy was a virgin and Mcmurphy wanted to help him, I guess, solve his problem. And they have a massive party. Billy loses his virginity. The men, they're popping pills, drinking, having fun. They just go nuts. They go wild. And then when Ratchet figures this out and just, everything just goes out of control. And, electroshock therapy. Mcmurphy, Chief Brogdon, they get electroshock therapy within the novel, and there's several types of different punishments, and several times, Ratchet tries different things to get control of the men, and nothing works. And ultimately, near the end of the novel, or at the end of the novel, Ratchet sends Mcmurphy as, pretty much as a last resort. She sends him to get a lobotomy, and he gets a lobotomy, and pretty much lobotomies, again, they're not performed anymore because they're pretty much just literally, they're oh my god. When you get a lobotomy, your personality changes. You can be made a vegetable. I mean, some sites or some scientists who believed in this would say there were some benefits, but there weren't benefits. Pretty much when you get a lobotomy, you're pretty much chopping away a part of your brain. And I'm not a scientist. I don't know exactly what they're cutting out of the brain, because it involves certain parts of the brain that you're cutting out. And for Mcmurphy, he receives a lobotomy, he becomes a vegetable, and Chief Brogdon kills him. Billy, the guy that Mcmurphy was trying to help not be a virgin. I mean, he's not a virgin, but since Nurse Ratchet figures this out and threatens, I'm going to tell your mom about this, Billy kills himself. And a lot of patients check themselves out because, they saw their hero, their Christ-like hero, become nothing, and he dies. Billy dies. I mean, this is supposed to be kind of a hospital, and people are just killing themselves, or Chief Brogdon commits murder, but we're not going to take it as murder because he was trying to save Mcmurphy's message. Yeah, but Chief Brogdon, I mean, the Chief believed in Mcmurphy, though, but I don't think Mcmurphy, I mean, okay, yes, after the lobotomy, he wasn't himself, but still, I mean, yes, his message lives on because Chief Brogdon killed him and then allowed the men to see Mcmurphy as weak, but at the same time, it's still killing someone. So I guess kind of like there's somewhat of a justification of killing Mcmurphy, and I mean, it kind of helps completely take away Ratchet's power because she was using lobotomies and electroshock therapy as, her nuclear weapon or her last or her ultimate weapon, because if it got to that point, that meant you were done, right? Like, you only got electroshock therapy and or a lobotomy if she couldn't control you through her pills, through her medications, through threats. You only got it then. So, Mcmurphy dies. Chief Brogdon lifts this control panel, which was this heavy thing within the novel that no one could lift. Because, I mean, you couldn't escape this institution, but Chief Brogdon lifts this massive panel. Because he's like a massive man. I mean, at the beginning we would think that he was weak, but no, he's a tall and massive man. Chief Brogdon lifts this control panel, smashes a window, and escapes. A lot of patients check themselves out. I mean, the ones who are vegetables, they can't go anywhere. Mcmurphy's dead, and yeah, that's the work. That's how the novel ends. Yeah. So, in terms of deeper meaning, in terms of analysis here, I mean, there's so much to talk about within this work. I mean, you see the conflict between Ratchet and Mcmurphy, and Mcmurphy is not the greatest person or the greatest character to support, but the way that he kind of like stands up for the patients, for the men, and tell them to grow a pair is that, it's inspiring and it helps the men because, again, a lot of these men, they check themselves in. They really wanted help, but Ratchet wasn't really helping them. She was just exercising her power over them. Especially at that time in psychology and treatment. I mean, checking yourself into a mental institution, it wasn't really going to help you. I mean, if you go in thinking that you're going to get some type of help, but you receive a lobotomy, you just check yourself in for something worse. You check yourself in to literally be turned into a vegetable. And I can assure you that Mcmurphy wasn't the first to receive a lobotomy. You can see that this was something that was practiced commonly. In electroshock therapy, the version that they were you're strapping someone to a table, performing electroshock therapy on them, thinking that this will improve behavior or change the way in which certain characters act. But the thing is, like, this never changed Mcmurphy. It never helped Mcmurphy. It just made him stronger with the men because every time he came back from it, he was like, you see, I had electroshock therapy, I'm still fine, I'm still the same old me, and he would go back to causing havoc. So by the end of the novel, Ratchet pretty much loses a significant portion of her power. She doesn't lose her job, we don't really go into that. So I would imagine that she would still work there, but the way in which the men were afraid of her and the way in which that the men had no balls, they definitely had some now, because a lot of them took Mcmurphy's message and ran with it. Some checked themselves out. Without Mcmurphy, they probably would have never done that. Chief Brogdon would have never left the mental institution. And the men would never have grown an identity and stood up for themselves. So yes, the chief did commit murder, but at the same time, I guess he helped Mcmurphy live on. But the only thing is that I wouldn't really Mcmurphy. The thing is, he was always in it for himself. Mcmurphy did not go to that mental institution to help anybody. He was always looking out for himself and not, and trying to escape slippery situations. So even though that he had he had a lobotomy, so that wasn't really the same Mcmurphy that we knew. So the Mcmurphy with the lobotomy, who knows what he would have wanted? Because the original Mcmurphy, after the lobotomy, he was gone. Because there's when you have a lobotomy, when your brain is altered in that way, you can't be the same person again. You just can't. And he wasn't going to be the same person again. He was made into a vegetable. He was gone. That brutality, that personality, that cunning, ready to fight character was gone after the lobotomy. So yes, Ratchet in of a way by having a lobotomy performed on Mcmurphy, I think she killed Mcmurphy. But in killing the character, the personality, the being of Mcmurphy, she created a Jesus Christ figure. She created a martyr, because now this message of standing up for yourself, this message of the ideas and the inspiration that Mcmurphy put in this mental institution, they lived on, and the men took it and ran with it. So definitely we see that Mcmurphy, what he sought out to do at the beginning of the novel is exactly what he did. He literally helped the men grow a pair. I mean, Billy definitely grow a pair, because he came from being a virgin to not being a virgin. But then, I mean, he kills himself, so maybe not having a pair was somewhat of a good thing, because he wasn't dead. Chief Brogdon is a character that is significant, but at the same time, I mean, he has his own mental problems. So yes, he believes in Mcmurphy, but the fact that he committed murder, he's not just a level-headed person. I mean, he was there for a reason. Okay, he was definitely there for a reason. So when you're hearing his commentary, when you're hearing his inner thoughts, and you're reading, because he's our narrator, and you're reading, what he's telling us, you have to be cautious and really think about what he's telling us, and be careful with that. And another thing, in terms of the time that this novel is being written in, I mean, this really shows you how far psychology has come in the world, because, I mean, in the United States alone, a lot of lobotomies were performed, and at the time, a lot of people thought that it could help people, but really, you were just literally cutting a part of the brain out, or cutting connections between the brain. And again, I'm not a doctor. I don't know exactly what. I'm not going to say the names of what parts you're cutting, because I'll probably mispronounce it. But at any time when someone mentions you're performing, you're doing anything to your lobes, you're cutting anything in your lobes, or you're removing anything, it's never good. It's never going to help you. And even if they say that there's no effect, there's always going to be an effect. You can't just go into a man's brain and cut things out and say there's not going to be an effect. There's going to be an effect. So Ratchet definitely killed the character, the spirit of Mcmurphy, but she definitely created the god of McMurphy, or the religion of McMurphyism. That's just coming from me. She created McMurphyism, the philosophy or the ideal of growing a pair for mental patients, and actually fighting to get some help, because these men were not getting help. They were only getting their balls chopped off. Yeah. So that's my view of this book. That's my summary analysis of it. Please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and or comment, and I'll see you guys in the next video.